I've been dipping in and out of various religious texts for some time now, which is a source of great amusement to my wife, actually, because my wife has some kind of religious faith, although I'm not absolutely sure what it is, and she knows I'm an atheist, so she's always a bit mystified why I'm reading these books. But I don't know myself, actually. I guess I'm just looking for I just see them as a source of poetic ideas, really, and don't really regard them as anything other than that. And I'm actually kind of actively trying to divest myself of the cultural baggage that comes with them, really, and the institutional baggage that they carry. And in some ways, it's a shame they do carry those baggage, that whole weight of history and oppression and unpleasantness and that goes with them, because there is some interesting stuff in those things, as poetry. I take poetry very seriously, so it's not, I don't regard it as entertainment. I think it's something more important than that. But there is some interesting stuff there. And I've been reading a lot about kind of apophatic traditions and mystery traditions, and the mystics generally, really. And I guess they're getting some time in the sun right now because of all the studies that's going on in neuroscience to do with particular kind of brain states which associate with, not so much with particular gods, but with more mystical ways of being in the world. So I'm thinking of Michael Persinger's work with that weird Shakti helmet he made that supposedly gives people this sense of immensity, of being outside of their body and becoming one with the universe, kind of thing. And the presentation that Jill Bolte-Taylor gave at the TED Talks about the experiences she had when she had a stroke, in which she had a similar kind of experience of an immensity and of a connectivity to the wider world. So that sense of beingness and selfness wasn't located quite so securely within the body of an individual, but feels distributed and feels connected. And there's a lot of stuff around that. So that you got Andrew Newberg writing about absolute unity of being, which again is that psychological state, if you like, brain state, emotional state, which again is depersonalized. I think there's a phrase something like afferentiation of the orientation, something like that. But I think it's basically when your sense of your sense in which selfness and ego and being and consciousness is disoriented, so it's not oriented towards self, as I say, but is distributed. So a lot of the language of mystics, which tends to focus on that, or lean in the direction of that kind of feeling, is being, if not supported, then at least interpreted in the light of these kind of neurological findings. But it does do a funny thing, I think, to other kinds of religious traditions which have much more clear stories attached to them. Things like the Bible stories and the particular characters of God that are pictured in there, or the particular character of Jesus particularly. It's quite interesting. I don't know where I'm going with this really, but I suppose one source of amusement that I have is to try to think about those stories as kind of allegories or parables or those kind of things, which suggest the unspeakable or the difficult to understand for people like myself who aren't as scientifically literate in those areas as perhaps I'd like to be. So there's a line, for example, there's a line in the Bible somewhere, and I don't know it well enough to say, where Jesus says that the only way to God is through me, he says, I think. Or maybe he says the only way to heaven is through me. I am the way, he says. The only way to God is through me. Now, how I'm choosing to interpret that is through this idea that Jesus is a man. I mean, he might be a lot of other things as well, but he's the characteristic of Jesus is he's a man. He's a human being. He has human forms and human frailties. He has human sense, he has human sense-making process, he has human limitations and human meaning-constructing processes. He lives a human life and is built and has kind of human universals built into him as his means of accessing the world, just like the rest of us do. At least that's the idea. So I'm choosing to believe that what that's about is that if you, or I, or anybody, wants to perhaps think about other ways of being, perhaps think about absolute unity of being, perhaps think about apophatic traditions, perhaps have an idea of God, even not believing anything, but just have an idea of this thing called God as a kind of poetic reference point, then the way to get to that is through the body of a human being, because that's the only thing we've got. There is a phrase in education, because I'm in education myself, but there's a phrase in education which is that you can only reach people from where they are. You can only teach people from where they are. You know, you can't. There's no point in using a language or a set of phrases or a set of ideas to teach people if they don't have a hook to hang those ideas on. So you've got to absolutely meet them where they are. And I think in a sense that's what that little passage is about. If you want to achieve the mysteries of absolute unity of being, if you want to enter the mystery, if you like, or you just want to just think about it for a while, the only way you can do it is by starting from yourself as a man, or as a woman, of course. I think more than that, I think there's a way of interpreting that in terms of the crucifixion. This is probably a longer story than I've got a video for. But one of the things I quite like about the crucifixion story, and there's a lot to really, really dislike about it, is that what I always imagine when I see that crucifixion story, or the image of the crucifix, is I always think of that as a kind of as the triangulation point on a map. You know what I mean? The upright spar and the horizontal spar of the cross. I like the cross you get on treasure maps, and the centre of human being, which is what's effectively being nailed in that image. What's being indicated in the image of the man on the crucifix, for me, is the way to the big mystery of life, or just the way to entertain the idea of a big mystery, is by nailing the absolute centre of what it is to be a human being. Like targeting that, putting that target in the crosshairs of your telescopic sight, and really just going for that point.